Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for all the colleagues gave the previous speeches. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation clearly?
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's it.
Well, honestly, I used the last 1 hour actually to skip a lot of slides of my PowerPoint presentation, because obviously all those cities actually work on the same issues, and it's not today my part to tell you about this IoT project or this pilot. So I really try to focus in the next 15 minutes on a couple of issues which probably has not mentioned yet, because I think this is probably a little bit important. Honestly, I think the city of Vienna actually follows a different part than probably the city of Newcastle and other cities. As Alena Circa-Brett mentioned in the beginning, we have close look about the nice to have things, and they're probably the things with the biggest output, you know. And when I do follow the smart city discussion over the last, I would say 8 years, because actually 8 years now I'm responsible for the smart city strategy of the city of Vienna, I've seen so many things coming and going that actually I have a very, well, sometimes a very different view on all these smart city discussions. And that's funny, but sometimes it's very sad. And I try to be on the point today in my next 50 minutes. One issue I want to highlight right in the beginning. I'm not a civil servant anymore. Even so, in the city of Vienna, we have 120,000 people just working for the city government. I am one of these 120,000, but not a civil servant. So what does that mean? The Smart City Agency is a special department which got outsourced off the inner city administration in order to be more flexible. So who we are? We are a company owned by the city 100%, financed by the city 100%, but still we are kind of legally a private company, which gives us more flexibility. And when it comes to smart city, because smart city in the definition of the smart city of Vienna is kind of an horizontal approach. So my job is to combine all those different sectors: environment, digitalization, mobility, energy, participation, finance, and many more things. So my job, the job of the Smart City Agency of the city of Vienna, is not to implement IoT projects and not to implement whatsoever. Our job is more to do a moderation, you know, to follow a strategic approach. This is probably something different to other cities. I love this graph, even though it's written in German, but I want to highlight that because this graph says something about the cycle of innovation. And I think this is very much important, because sometimes you really have to love listening to all this conversation and the presentations about smart city parking apps and all this stuff. You know, I have on my iPhone, I think 78 apps, and I do use 4 of them. And I think it's similar for all of you. The thing is, Fraunhofer, our colleagues from Germany, they did a very, very interesting study. In the study, what they did is actually they had a look on innovation, on urban innovations, you know, on around 600 different urban innovations. You know, let's say the computer is one innovation which is used in the city. It's used everywhere, but it's in the city used as well, you know, and many, many more things. And they had a look at how long an urban innovation actually lasts, you know. And we see that in the 18th century, let's say in 1760, an innovation actually lasted 50 years. Well, in 2017, it's less than 2 years. Probably in 2020, it's sometimes an application lasts probably 2 months, you know. So the thing is, innovation goes so quickly, and cities are very different. Cities are responsible for all our citizens. We get paid by tax money. So actually we are sometimes very conservative, let's say. The city of Vienna is a city of plans and programs and strategies. But a city plan, a city strategy, it's not made for half a year. It's made for a cycle of 5 years, sometimes 10 years. So it's very tricky to implement, let's say, a digitalization strategy for a city, because you have to write it for 5 to 10 years, but the real innovation actually is so much quicker. So we see there is a conflict of goals between real innovation in the real world, especially when it comes to technique, and how a city acts. And actually, this is a core problem of smart city. This is a problem why sometimes we focus on all these nice to have stuff, but the output is so less, you know, the output is so small. The output of a parking app is so small when it comes to the question, do we manage to transform a really entire big city? I think it's useless, but this is probably my personal interpretation. The city of Vienna, why we are probably doing quite well when it comes to transformation? Well, we are responsible. We do own the entire city infrastructure. In the city of Vienna, we say from the cradle to the grave, you know, of course, obviously, when you have 120,000 people working for the city, well, they have to do some jobs. And the job is to kind of manage the entire infrastructure. We never privatized nothing, you know, private sector, public transport sector, mobility sector, energy sector, housing sector. One highlight, 60% of the citizens of the city of Vienna, and we are 2 million people right now, or 1.9 something, but 60% of the people in the city of Vienna do live in subsidized housing. That means 60% of the people of the city of Vienna do not pay more than €7.50 per square meter rent. And that has something to do with being a livable city. This is something to do with being a city of quality of living. And this is probably much more a smart city than a city full with sensors. What we do as well, actually, we have our strategic papers. We have our goals. We know exactly actually what to do, because we are very, very focused on that thing, and we are very, very strong in kind of monitoring. You know, it's a lot of governance stuff. It's sometimes boring, pain in the ass stuff, but you have to do it, you know, because otherwise you always just focus on the nice to have stuff. But if you know exactly where you use CO2 emission, where you know exactly where you lose energy, when you know exactly where energy is coming from, you know, then actually you are able to manage it. That means having a strategy is nice to have, but you need to have a very, very high quality of monitoring system. That's what we are doing. But many goals we have actually have conflicts. And that's always what we see, especially when it comes to digitalization projects. You know, sometimes in the digital projects, we have a high investment. So it's very cost intensive. The output is sometimes very small. It produces more CO2 emission than ever. The quality of living for the people, actually, it's not getting that much better. So we see conflicts, you know, and actually that's the real insights you have to have, you know, otherwise actually you're just doing stuff which is not that important. Well, today, actually, I want to focus on a couple of issues which I think it's very much important. And the two issues is participation and finance. Because, you know, the problem is how to finance a smart city, and the problem is how to participate with the citizens. And I think we do have some very interesting pilot projects in this area. And this is probably what I want to share. Allow me to step one step back, because this question of what is a smart city, you know, it just comes to my mind, you know, because I don't get this parking app out of my mind from the colleague of Newcastle, you know, there are hundreds of companies walked into the city hall of the city of Vienna and told us, well, we do have the solution for your mobility problem. There's the parking app, you know, use this parking app and all the traffic jams are gone. And we decided, well, actually, we will never, ever want to support a parking app in our city, because a parking app makes it probably easier for citizens to park their car. But that's the opposite of what we want. We want it as hard for our citizens to find a parking space. We want to give them options to use public transport system. And we are investing at the moment 2 billion euros in our public transport systems. We are working on 5 different metro lines, 6 different tram lines, 40% of all our ways in our city, 40% are done by public transport system. That's a smart city project. Of course, the new metro lines, they are super innovative and digital, and they drive autonomous, and they are full of sensors, and once they brake, they produce energy and augmented reality and all this fancy stuff which we believe we need to have. But the public transport system, the 2 billion investment, this is the smart city project, not the parking app. And this, I think, is in the core of the city of Vienna smart city strategy. And this is so much different to Palo Alto and Silicon Valley and Asia and probably Newcastle and other cities. Because the thing is, the city of Vienna will never become Silicon Valley. Not a single city in Europe will become Silicon Valley. So we have to find our way, and this way is probably sometimes a little bit different. Well,